A far more striking corroboration of the view furnished by certain passages of the Avesta describing the flight of Tishtrya when the demon of drought, called Apaosha, or the burner in the Parsi scriptures. In Rig Veda, the fight of Indra with Vritra is often represented as a struggle for water, or as the striving for cows, or the striving for day. And Indra is said to have released the cows or waters and brought on dawn or the sun by killing Vritra. Now, Indra as Vritra appearing in the Avesta, but the fight for waters is therein ascribed not to him, but to Tishtrya, the star of rain. It is he who knocks down Apaosha and liberates the water for the benefit of man, with the assistance of the winds and the light that dwells in the waters. In short, Tishtra's conquest over Apaosha is an exact parallel of Indra's conquest over Vritra, as described in Rig Veda. And as the legends are interpreted at present, they are said to refer to the breaking up of the clouds and the bringing on of the rains of the earth, Tishtrya being supposed to be the star of rain. But this theory fails to account for the fact how the recovery of the dawn and the rising of the sun, or the bringing on of the light, were included amongst the effects of Indra's victory over Vritra. It will also be shown in another video that the struggle for water has very little to do with rain, and that the fight for water and the fight for light are equally synchronous, being two different versions of the same story. In short, both these legends really represent the victory of the powers of light over darkness. Shushna, or the Scorcher, is one of the names given to Indra's enemy in Rig Veda, and the result of the conflict between Indra and Shushna is the release of the waters, as well as the finding of the morning cows and the winning of the sun. Apaosha is thus Shushna in a different garb, and the only difference between the two legends is that while Indra is the chief actor in one, Tishtrya is the chief hero in another. But this difference is immaterial inasmuch as the attributes of one deity are often transferred, even in Rig Veda, to another. The Avestic legend of Tishtrya is, therefore, rightly understood by Zen scholars to be a reproduction of the Vedic legend of Indra and Vritra. Now, in Tir-yash, Tishtrya is represented as inevitably overcoming Apaosha with the help of Homa sacrifice, offered to Tishtrya by Ahura Mazda. The fight is carried on in the region of the waters, the sea, from which Tishtrya is described as rising up victorious after defeating Apaosha. Dave Apaosha is again said to have assumed the form of a dark horse, while Tishtrya is represented as opposing him in the form of a bright horse, hoof against hoof, and eventually coming up victorious from out of the sea. Vurukasha, like the sacrificial horse rising from the waters in Rig Veda. But the passage, most important for our purpose, is the one in which Tishtrya informs Ahura Mazda as to what should be done in order to enable Tishtrya to overcome his enemy and to appear before the faithful at the appointed time. "If men would worship me," says Tishtrya to Ahura Mazda, "with the sacrifice in which I were invoked by my own name, as they worship the other yasatas, the sacrifices in which they are invoked by their own names, and I should have come to the faithful at the appointed time. And I should have come in the appointed time of my beautiful immortal life, should it be 1 night, 2 nights, 50 or 100 nights." As Tishtrya appears before man after his battle with Apaosha, the phrase "appointed time" signifies the time during which the battle is fought, and at the termination of which Tishtrya comes to the faithful. And the passage therefore means 1. At the appointed time when Tishtrya was to appear before man, after fighting with Apaosha, varied from 1 night to 100 nights, and 2. That Tishtrya required to be strengthened during this period by Homa sacrifices, which he was to be invoked in his own name. We have seen above that 100 nightly Soma sacrifices were offered to Indra by the ancient Vedic sacrificers, to enable him to a secure victory over Vritra, and that Indra was the only deity to whom libations were offered in these sacrifices. The legend of Tishtrya and Apaosha is therefore an exact reproduction of Indra's fight with Vritra or Vala, and, with his correspondence before us, we should feel no hesitation in accepting the view stated above regarding the origin of the Ati-râtra sacrifice. Neither Dharmister or Spiegel explains why the appointed time for the appearance of Tishtrya is described as 1 night or 2 nights or 50 or 100 nights, though both translate the original in the same way. The legend also forms the subject of chapter 7 of the Bundahish, but there too we find no explanation as to why the appointed time is described as varying from 1 to 100 nights. It is, however, suggested that the appointed time may refer to the season of rains, but rains cannot be said to come after 1 night, 2 nights, or 50 or 100 nights, and the latter expression would therefore be utterly inappropriate in their case. Nor, as stated above, does Tishtrya's fight with Apaosha represent only a struggle for rain, since we know that it is a struggle for light as well. We've also seen the existence of night sacrifices in the Vedic literature, extending over 1, 2, 3, 10, or 100 nights, indicating long darkness during which Indra fought with Vala, and the coincidence between this fact and the appointed time of Tishtrya cannot be regarded as accidental. The legends are undoubtedly identical character, and taking the one to illustrate the other, the only conclusion deducible from them is that 100 nights is regarded to be the maximum duration of the fight between Indra and Vala, or Tishtrya and Apaosha, so far as the ancestors of the Indo-Iranian people are concerned, and that the sea, Varurukasha, or the ocean encompassed with darkness, as the Rig Veda has it, was the scene of this battle between the power of light and darkness. We also learn from them that the hero of the battle, whether he was Indra or Tishtrya, stood in need of help, derived from the performance of the sacrifice specifically offered to him during this period. And that, as a matter of fact, such sacrifices were performed in ancient time. The word Sato-karahe does not occur in the Avesta, but in Ati-râtra, a ram of 100-fold energy is spoken of. And considering the fact that in the Brâhmanas, the beautiful ram with horns bent round is said to be one of the incarnations of Vritra, and that Indra is also described as appearing in the form of a ram in Rig Veda. It is very probable that the phrase shown above refers to Vritra in the Ati-râtra, and, like the epithet, the adjective means not possessed of 100 powers, but master of 100 deeds or sacrifices. There is thus very close correspondence between the Vedic and the Avestic ideas on this, and this strengthens the conclusion that the night sacrifices in Vedic literature had their origin in the existence of a long continuous night of varying durations in the original home of the Vedic people. We can now also satisfactorily explain why Tishtrya is described as bringing hither the circling years of men. It's the Avestic parallel of the Vedic story of the dawn, setting in motion the ages of man, or the Manchwa Yuga, discussed in a previous video, and shows that when Tishtrya's fight with Apaosha, or Indra's war with Vala, was over, and the new year commenced with a long dawn, followed by months of sunshine, varying from 7 to 11 in number, according to the latitude of the place. In the light of what has been stated, we can now better understand the original nature and meaning of the Ati-râtra sacrifice. It is a nightly sacrifice, performed during the night, even present day, and commenters have not succeeded in converting it to a day sacrifice. So far, it's all right, but the question is, why should the sacrifice be called Ati-râtra? The prefix Ati corresponds with the Latin trans, ordinarily denoting something beyond, something on the other side or at the other end, and not something pervading, extending, or spreading the whole extent of anything. Even Sayana in his commentary says the only place where the word Ati-râtra occurs in Rig Veda explains it to mean that which is the past or beyond the night. And Rudradata in his commentary gives the same explanation. The Ati-râtra therefore denotes a trans-nocturnal sacrifice that is performed at either end of the night. Now, according to Aitareya Brâhmana, the Ati-râtra sacrifice is performed for the purpose of driving out the asuras from the darkness of night. And the Tendya Brâhmana tells us that Prajapati, who first received the sacrifice, created from it the twin of day and night. It follows from this that the Ati-râtra was performed at the close of such a night as give rise to the ordinary days and nights, or, in other words, the regular succession of days and nights followed its performance. This could only be the case if we suppose that the Ati-râtra was performed at the end of a long, continuous night in regions where such a night could occur. With us in the temperate or tropical zones, ordinary days and nights regularly succeed each other throughout the year without any break, and it's meaningless, if not absurd, to speak of the cycle of day and night as produced from a particular night of the year. Again, on the theory of a daily struggle between light and darkness, the asuras must be turned out of darkness every night, and strictly speaking, the performance of the Ati-râtra is necessary on every one of the 360 nights of the Satra. As a matter of fact, the Ati-râtra is performed only at the beginning and the end of the Satra. And even then, regular Satra is said to commence on the Chaturvimsha and close on Mahavrat Day, and not on the concluding Ati-râtra day. It seems, therefore, that the performance of the Ati-râtra was not originally intended to drive away the asuras from only the first of 360 nights, over which the Satra now extends. For in that case, there's no reason why the asuras were not required to be expelled from every one of the 360 nights. It follows, therefore, the Ati-râtra, or the trans-nocturnal sacrifice, refers to some night not included in the regular nights of the cow's walk. It's true the Ati-râtra was performed at the beginning and the end of every Satra, and in one sense it is, therefore, a trans-satra or Ati-satra sacrifice. But it does not account for the name Ati-râtra, as the Satra is not held during the night. We must therefore hold that the two Ati-râtras were originally performed not at the beginning and the end of a Satra, but at the beginning and the end of a night, which occurred or intervened between the last and the first day of the Satra. When this night ended with an Ati-râtra, the usual Satra began, and the sun was above the horizon during the period producing the regular processions of days and nights, and therefore no Ati-râtra was needed during the Satra. For as stated in the Tendya Brâhmana, the object of the Ati-râtra was gained. But the Satra closed the long night, and the Ati-râtra had therefore again to be performed at the end of the Satra to drive the asuras from this night. It's shown before that we have direct and reliable authority in the Tishtrya Samhita to hold that the cow's walk was once completed in 10 months, or 300 days, and it was therefore appropriately closed with and introduced by an Ati-râtra. The word is thus rationally explained, for the sacrifice was performed at the beginning and close of the long night, and was therefore adequately called a trans-nocturnal sacrifice. Between these two Ati-râtras came all the night sacrifices mentioned above, offered exclusively to Indra. The old cow's walk of 10 or less than 10 months, the Ati-râtra or the trans-nocturnal, the Ratri Kratus, and the Ratri Satras, or nightly Soma sacrifices of 2, 3, and up to 100 continuous nights' duration, and lastly, the Ati-râtra, to be again followed by the cow's walk, thus performing the complete yearly round of sacrifices performed by the primeval ancestors of the Vedic people. And each of these sacrifices at originally the same place in the yearly round as it is indicated by the root meaning of its name. But when the year of 10 months was converted into one of 12 to suit the altered conditions of a new home, the cow's walk expanded into a performance of 360 days, and the elastic nature of the greater portion of the performance, as pointed out earlier, permitted the change to be easily carried out. But though the annual satra expanded in this way, encroaching upon the night sacrifices of the long night, which were no longer needed, the Ati-râtra was retained as an introductory sacrifice and was incorporated into the ceremonies of the satra itself. Thus, the 2 Ati-râtra sacrifices, which were originally performed as shown by the etymology at the 2 termini of the long night, came to be converted into the introductory and concluding sacrifices of the annual satra. And if the word Ati-râtra had not been retained, we would have not any clue to reveal to us the story of its changing fortune. But the night sacrifices, the Ratrikratas, the Ratrisatras, which were performed during the long night between the 2 Ati-râtras, were no longer needed, and their nature came to be soon misunderstood until, at last, commenters finally made room for them in the class of daily Soma sacrifices, partly under Ahinas and partly under Satras, by means of the equation that Ratri, night, was equal to Aho-ratre, day and a night, in sacrificial literature. How this change was carried out is a question beyond the scope of this study, but it may here be stated that it was the authors of the Brâhmanas, or the Brahmana Vadins, who preceded them, that had to perform the difficult task of adapting the ancient sacrificial calendar to the changed condition of their new home. Somewhat after the manner of Numa's reform to the ancient Roman calendar, the sacrifice was the main ritual of Vedic religion, and naturally enough the priests must have tried to preserve as much of the old sacrificial system as they possibly could in adapting it to the new conditions. The task was by no means an easy one, and those that find fault with the Brâhmanas as full of fanciful speculations must bear in mind the fact that an ancient and sacred system of sacrifices had to be adapted to new conditions by assigning plausible reasons for the same, and at a time when the true origin of the system was almost forgotten. The Brâhmanas could not have indulged in free speculations about the origin of the rites and ceremonies mentioned by them, had the latter originated in their own time, or in days so near to them that the real traditions of the origin of these ceremonies could be preserved intact. But so long as these traditions were fresh, no explanation was probably needed, and when they became dim, their place had to be supplied by plausible reasons based on such traditions as were known at the time. This throws quite a new light on the nature and composition of the Brâhmanas. But as the discussion is not pertinent to the subject at hand, we cannot enter into it more fully in this time. We have now reviewed the leading features of the system of Soma sacrifices as described in the Vedic literature, so far as our purpose is concerned, and have seen that by the aid of Arctic theory, some hard facts therein, which have been hitherto incomprehensible, can be easily and naturally explained. The history of a whole sacrificial system, from the point of view indicated above, is a work quite outside the realm of these videos, but so far as we have examined the subject, and especially the question about the isolated group of 100 nightly Soma sacrifices, we have sufficient evidence therein to warrant us holding that these sacrifices are a relic from the ancient times, when the ancestors of the Vedic rishis performed them with the object of helping Indra to fight with the powers of darkness. It has already been shown in the first part of this set of videos that the cow's walk, like the Roman year, once lasted only 10 months, and a series of suitable night sacrifices is the natural supplement to such sessions. Both are relics of ancient times, and taken along with the evidence regarding the existence of a long dawn of 30 days, and of a long day and night, discussed in previous videos, They conclusively established the existence of an ancient home of the ancestors of the Vedic people in the circumpolar region. The sacrificial sessions of the Navagvas and the Dashagvas, the legend of Durga Thomas growing old in the 10th month, the tradition about the ancient year of 5 seasons, or the yoking of 7 or 10 horses to the chariot of the sun, all go to strengthen the same view. The Avestic passages regarding the duration of Trishtya's fight with Apaosha, the Puranic tradition about Indra being the master of 100 sacrifices or destroyer of 100 cities, the existence of a series of 100 nightly Soma sacrifices, which, though obsolete long since, could not have found place in the sacrificial works of the Ratri-satras unless they were ancient sacrifices performed, as their name indicates, during night. These and many other minor facts noticed earlier further corroborate, if corroboration be needed, our theory regarding the original home of the ancient race near the North Pole. It must therefore be stated here that we do not wish to imply any way the numerous sacrificial details found in later Vedic literature were in vogue or were known in these ancient times. To the contrary, we are prepared to believe that in all probability these ancient sacrifices were very simple in character. The ancient priests probably went on sacrificing from day to day and afterwards night to night, without any idea that the system was capable of giving rise to various rigid annual satras. The sacrifice was the only ritual of their religion. And howsoever simple such sacrifices might have been in ancient times, it was almost a matter of duty, at least with the priests, to perform them every day. It was also a means, as remarked elsewhere, to keep up with the calendar in ancient times, as the yearly round of sacrifices closely followed the course of the sun. It is from this latter point of view that the ancient sacrificial system is important for historical or antiquarian purposes, and we have examined it in the same light. This examination, it will be seen, has resulted in the discovery of a number of facts which lead us directly to, and can be satisfactorily explained only by, the theory of the original Arctic home. And when our conclusions are thus supported by hymns of Rigveda on one hand and sacrificial literature on the other, we need have no doubt of their correctness. What do you think of the evidence of the Arctic home in the Vedas? Let us know in the comments down below. Remember to smash that like button. If you know anyone interested in this kind of content, please let them know. It sure helps us out.